Right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Council Cabinet for this evening, Wednesday the 8th of February. Councillor Banwaite's going to be a few minutes late, so I'm going to start off proceedings to make sure that we keep to time and begin promptly. So first of all, apologies. We have apologies from Councillors Bolton, Graves and Eldred. And as I say, Councillor Banwaite will be with us fairly shortly. Late items, we've got an addendum at item 20, which should have been circulated and hopefully you all have, which we'll take at item 20. Receipt of petitions, there are none. Identification of urgent items to which call-in will not apply. Monitoring officer says there are none. Are there any declarations of interest, please? No, that's fine. Minutes of the meeting held on the 18th of January. If there's any inaccuracies, if members could indicate now, please. Otherwise, we'll accept those. Lovely, agreed. Thank you. Item 7, recommendations from Corporate Scrutiny and Governance Board. They've been circulated as well. They met last night, and as normal, we'll take those recommendations as we go through each agenda item. So we move on to the key decisions then, the first of which at item 8 is the determination of school admission arrangements for Derby City maintained and voluntary controlled schools in 2018-19. And Councillor Russell, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. As Cabinet members will know, we have a statutory duty to apply the school's admissions code, and we also have that duty to consult on the admission arrangements for each academic year. This is a Cabinet report to launch the to agree the admissions arrangements. You'll see there are no significant changes to the admissions arrangements for 2018 to 2019 compared to the previous academic year, and there have been no objections or comments relating to the proposed admissions arrangements that have been received by us. So I'd like to recommend 2.1 and 2.2 and this paper to be approved.
Thank you, Councillor Russell. Anyone wishing to speak? I've got Councillor Holmes first. Councillor Holmes.
Just a quick one, Chair. Can I just ask for a refresher of an overview of how local school catchment areas are put into place and how they'd be reviewed, probably in terms of maybe the academies and also other schools as well. Just I couldn't quite get a refresher on that from these documents. Thanks.
Yeah, I'll let Andy answer that, the operational detail, but I know that a number of academies have the opportunity to extend their boundaries if they want and look outside those catchment areas, but Andy will do the detail on that.
Yeah, it may be a conversation to have outside of the meeting, but essentially the local authority has a strategic responsibility and a statutory duty to ensure there are sufficient school places. And we work across the school system, including engaging with academies, although academies are not obliged to engage in that piece of work, and that's part of the challenge, but part of the work that we do as a local authority with the school system and the school network. What we also do when looking at new housing developments that are being developed particularly on the boundaries of the city and the county, is that we work very closely with county colleagues around their strategic school planning. And I think a paper came to the last Cabinet around a development, and there were some questions there raised around school places to ensure that where the development is being planned and being built, that we've got clarity around the catchment area and either understanding around how we might need to expand certain schools so that they can take sufficient children moving into the city. And that, depending on where the development is, in terms of is it mostly going to be in the city or the county, will then determine who takes the lead on that development. And we've got a very good working relationship with the county in relation to doing that. So we have got the statutory responsibility. We are working across the school system. That does present some challenges in terms of academies, but having said that, part of our secondary school pupil place planning in terms of predicting the increase in numbers in primary and secondary ages also takes into account the expansion of academies as well in the system. And we work with our county colleagues around those developments across the borders to ensure we've got enough school places across the system.
Thank you. Could I just ask, or it's a request really, I think this is one of those issues where it's very important for local ward councillors to have an understanding and an overview. Myself, as a Micklova ward councillor, I know Councillor Ingle in Chellaston, Councillor Shanker in Sinfin, and all the wards where we know there's going to be a huge impact with regards to the expansion of housing, both inside our boundary and on the actual boundary on the other side. And I think, could I ask for officers to make efforts to liaise with ward councillors so that we can have an overview of how things are going in terms of negotiations and also a full understanding really of where we are with it. I think that'd be really useful at a local level for us to understand. I know for a fact that you know, I'm already getting lots of queries from local residents on that, and I just like to have a bit more detail. I'm sure others will, to be able to answer those questions.
Councillor Russell?
Yeah. No probs. You've got access to the officers just like we have, Matthew, so, you know, anytime you want to talk to them about any of that, go for it.
Thank you. Are there any further questions or comments? No. Okay, then in that case I shall ask Cabinet for your agreement to recommendations 2.1 and 2.2. I shall have a show of support for those, please. Okay, that's agreed, thank you. So, moving on to item 9, which is Home to School Transport Assistance Policy Consultation, and that's Councillor Russell again.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is a paper requesting that Cabinet agree to launch a statutory consultation period on making changes to the Home to School Transport Policy. Cabinet will be aware that we have a statutory duty to assist young people with educational needs to and from school under the age of 16. That is a statutory element which we can't and have no desire to change. This policy refers to the post-16 element of that, which is a discretionary element of the service. We absolutely appreciate that this is a very emotive issue. It affects a number of people in the city, so we want to make sure that we handle it in the most appropriate way possible. And to that end, both myself as the Cabinet Lead and Andy as the Strategic Director for the service have engaged and will continue to engage as part of this consultation phase. What we have done prior to launching the formal consultation is have some pre-consultation meetings with people who represent Parent Carer Forum and other interested parties, which have been very, very positive meetings. We've had very constructive dialogue with them and hope we can continue in that vein throughout the consultation period. The consultation will run for 8 weeks from the 20th of February until the 17th of April. And once the consultation is concluded, an equality impact assessment will be done, as is the usual way. And that will be reported back to Cabinet in June for us to make a decision on what to do based on that consultation.
Thank you, Councillor Russell. Are there any comments or questions relating to what Councillor Russell said or these papers? Yes, Philip, who's Youth Mayor, please.
Yeah, just two on this. Firstly, I've noticed that Uber will be coming to Derby in the near future, and so I was wondering if there was any potential for the council possibly to partner with them to try and make some savings on this. And then the second question related to the consultation itself, as found in Appendix 3. And I was just wondering, the consultation seems to consist of one question, which doesn't seem to leave too much opportunity for people to respond to the proposals. And so I was just wondering whether any consideration had been given to maybe giving more opportunity to people to respond in the consultation document, or if there was a reason it had been limited to a single question.
Thanks, Phil. Councillor Russell, please.
Yes, thank you for your questions, Philip. Uber, not sure. We have a duty to ensure that the young people that we travel and support in their travel to school are safe and protected when they are travelling. All our licence holders in the city have to undergo a DRB check, so we know that they are safe and looked after when they're being transported to and from school. So I don't know what Uber's procedures are. I wouldn't have thought that they're held to the same sort of standards that our licence holders are. So I wouldn't like to say yes to that, clearly. In terms of your question about the consultation form is binary in the way that it allows us to easily quantify people who say yes they agree, no they don't, and they're not sure. But it also gives people space to provide a more substantive, subjective view of it as well. So we can make sure that actually we can quantify quite easily the amount of people that agree or disagree, but also we can take account of people's additional comments and take those on board in consideration as part of the consultation too.
Thank you. Councillor Skelton, please.
Thank you. Just wanted to check a few things to start with. Appendix 2, the home to school transport assistance policy. I believe this is the one then that was consulted on in the spring 2015. Am I right in thinking? Certainly reads like the one that was. Right, okay. So this is coming now for agreement, approval now to Cabinet, because it hasn't been since, hasn't been back to Cabinet after.
No, it's not coming for agreement. This is a request to start the formal consultation period.
No, that's the post-16. I'm talking about the revised home to school transport assistance policy, Appendix 2. This was the document that was, as you've just said, consulted on in spring 2015. After that, it never came back to Cabinet for approval.
Sorry, can you just give me a second to find
Yeah, Appendix 2.
Oh, this Appendix 2?
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I've clarified that now. I thought you were talking about the other Appendix 2 because there's
No.
2 on this report.
Oh, right.
Yes, this is the revised policy, and this report also asks for agreement to accept the revisions to that policy, which are minor at this point.
Right. Well, I'm not sure minor is the best description of that, because if you go within that to 3.0, types of travel assistance, types of transport assistance, in the old policy it had taxis as an option. It now doesn't. I don't think that would be considered by many parents who have taxis for their children as a minor adjustment to the policy.
Ask all your questions, roll them into one, and then perhaps Councillor Russell will respond rather than
My point
into
is that
individually.
it does need to come back to Cabinet for approval, not just noting as it says in the recommendation, because it has not been back to Cabinet. Since the summer of 2015, it never came back after the consultation.
Don't know if...
Well, there's a whole load of things actually on the policy as well, which don't line up with the law. No, I'll carry on if you want. So, with regard to the types of transport assistance, as I say, there's only the three mentioned: travel pass or a season ticket, independent travel training, and a fuel allowance. But then if you move to the end of the document, 8.0, special needs discretionary transport, only granted in special circumstances, and basically only if there's any additional spaces available within private hire or minibus vehicles that are already going to the correct destination. That doesn't really line up with 3.0, because 3.0 precludes any private hire or hackney carriage minibus provision. And yet for some pupils it will be necessary. I don't think the policy is worded very well. It should in 3.0 be saying those three are the first things you look at, and then if none of those are suitable, then taxis should be looked at. It would read a lot better. It's very confusing at the moment. It really doesn't make sense. Well, you can carry on and answer those if you'd like, please. I could go on at great length because there's a lot of other things, but...
Yeah, Councillor Skelton, I've asked if you can raise your points and then we can, the officer and the Cabinet member can respond.
Okay. I'm just reading some notes I've made. In 2.5, there's no mention that children with SEND who can't walk the statutory distance due to either physical or learning disabilities are also eligible. 2.10. Yeah, just respond to those then.
Councillor Russell then, please.
So, Chair, I just point out that in 4.2 and 4.3 of the report, it highlights the changes to the policy that are listed at 4.3, and at 4.2 outlines that we are including sustainable modes of transport under Section 508 of the Education Act. As required by that Act, the policy has been updated with the amendments, and that is the whole policy that's there at Appendix 2, and the amendments are referred to in 4.3 underneath. Taxis are not precluded. Young people are still eligible and, I presume, are still using taxis to get to and from school where that's appropriate for their needs.
Right.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that, Councillor Russell. Are there any other points you'd like to raise, Councillor Skelton?
Just like to make the point again about the recommendation. It should be 2.1 ought to be to approve the general update, not noting, because it hasn't ever been approved.
Can I ask the monitoring officer if that sounds a reasonable request in line of...
On recommendation 2.1, instead of to note, it should be to approve because it's never been approved. No, that's the approving of the consultation for the post-16. This is you need to approve the actual revisions to the policy itself that went out to consultation in the spring of 2015 but have never come back to Cabinet since, until today.
I would have to check. I can't possibly answer that question at the moment because I don't have the 2015 Cabinet details in front of me. So I would have to check. There is a subtle difference between approving an entirely new policy and noting the updates which are statutorily required. In effect, you are noting a report that needs legislatively updating because the primary legislation has already required us to adhere to it. And then you would note the policy because the substantial changes or any amendments to the policy are not in the gift of the local authority to amend. We are being told what to do by primary legislation. So therefore we have to note. And noting the legislative changes is appropriate for the report to come, for the policy to come to council.
But what went out for consultation in the early spring of 2015, I don't believe was just to do with legislative updates. It was about saving money for the council.
Again, Chair, that is your view that you're asserting in this meeting. In the absence of any paperwork in front of me, I couldn't comment or answer your question at this moment in time.
Could I have then an assurance that that will be looked into, please?
Yes, I will look into it, and I'll liaise with the Strategic Director for People Services in respect of this. Currently, I am content with the way that the report is drafted because Cabinet is being asked to note of the statutory changes which are required by law the Cabinet member has to put forward to and advise Cabinet on. So the way the report is drafted at the moment, I'm happy that this does meet the requirements.
Thank you for that clarification from the monitoring officer that the paper is drafted appropriately. Are there any other questions or comments relating to this item? No. Okay then. So we have comments from the Scrutiny Board. I perhaps should have mentioned, and this is my fault, I apologise, I didn't mention under item 8, the Corporate and Scrutiny Governance Board resolved to note the report for item 8, so there were no specific recommendations, and likewise for this item 9, the Corporate Scrutiny and Governance Board resolved to note the report. So nothing additional to consider from Scrutiny. So can I put those recommendations then to Cabinet, please, 2.1 to 2.3, for show of agreement, please. Lovely, thank you, that's approved. So we move to item 10, which is Housing Benefit Overpayment Recovery Policy, and to Councillor Banwaite.
Thank you, Councillor Rawson. Colleagues, this policy sits underneath the collection strategy which Cabinet approved in December 2016. It updates the existing policy which has been in place since 2007. The policy aims to ensure the recovery action is consistent, transparent and proportional, and that the collection is maximised at minimum cost. The recommendations are set out in paragraphs 2.1 to 2.2. Any questions? Okay, so before I put those recommendations to Cabinet, the feedback from Scrutiny is that the Corporate Scrutiny and Governance Board resolved to request an update on the policy and performance at the December 2017 or January 2018 meeting of the Board. So, Cabinet to approve the recommendations. Thank you. The next agenda item is over to Councillor Repton, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. You'll see the summary and the recommendations. I think it's worthwhile just pondering on page 3, looking at where we were previously at, and that was the cuts to housing-related support have been built into the Council financial plan since 2012. In 2012-13, £9.45 million per annum. 2013-14, £3.765 million. 2015-16, £1.382 million. We're all aware of the circumstances that we're in at the present time, but cuts to the funding the Council receives from the government have meant that we need to think about different ways of delivering these services. Sadly, we do not have the luxury of a Surrey sweetheart deal that the Surrey Conservative Controlled Council has been negotiating with the government to give the richest authority in this country help, not others that need help, but Surrey in particular. I know there's going to be an investigation into that in terms of gerrymandering, and I know that we will be asking questions as a local authority about the implications for us and others, because I've already written to Jeremy Hunt about our concerns and the other Minister of State. So I'll park that for now. With regard to this, despite the dire situation that we've been forced into, there are some positive recommendations. And you'll see on page 4, in terms of, and I'll go through them one by one, refuge for domestic violence, the domestic violence refuge, the proposed funding of Derby Homes will take this over from April 2017. Derby Homes Milestone House, Derby Homes will take this over again from April 2017. Derby Homes, single point of entry, responsibility for this, again, Derby Homes will take this over on the same date. Whereas Riverside House, Centenary House, drug and alcohol high intensity, public health will take this over from 2017. Action Housing, high-risk offenders, this funding will cease. However, as of the 8th of January of this year, the PCC has agreed to fully fund the project and will become lead commissioner to a county and citywide service. And with regard to Riverside for young people, Children's Services deal with children through their housing framework and support and accommodation. And Housing Action, as we've been previously notified, the service finished on the 1st of December 2016. Now, I need to congratulate officers and other organisations who have been positive in the dire financial position that we've been put into to make sure that we can continue with these very valuable services for some of the most vulnerable people in our community. So we have found a positive way forward. The challenge for us becomes more and more difficult as time goes on, but I'm pleased with regard to this report and with regard to these organisations, we have found an alternative way forward. So the recommendations are as printed, Chair, and I recommend them to Cabinet. Thank you.
Okay, any questions? Councillor Rawson, please.
Yes, I'd just like to congratulate Councillor Repton and the officers on the work that they've done. Councillor Repton's really taken a lead on this, and in terms of being innovative and finding solutions to some of the problems. All of these services, we must remember, would have been lost under the Conservative government's cuts. And it's all right, Councillor Ingle, laughing about it, but services like domestic violence refuge, the Milestone House, services for people on drug and alcohol high intensity services, all of that would have been lost if Councillor Repton hadn't taken the lead on finding solutions to this other than from our revenue budget, which has been cut by the Conservative government. So it's to his credit and the credit of this Labour administration that that's been achieved despite the very difficult circumstances that the Conservative government has placed this and all other local authorities other than, it seems, Surrey.
Just a quick one, Chair. I think it will be remiss of us not to acknowledge that Derby Homes have stepped up to the plate and met the challenge. They will be contributing just over £600,000, which will mainly consist of the efficiencies and savings which they've made in their own management budgets and various other efficiencies. So we need to acknowledge that. Thank you.
Councillor saying that's certainly acknowledged. Youth Mayor, please.
I'd like to start by saying thank you that Voices in Action was included in this consultation, and I'm glad to see the positive difference that made as part of the consultation. One of the issues raised by Voices in Action regarded the closing of the youth services, and it talked about how Voices in Action hoped the new housing framework, which has also been looked at by us, would help ease these pressures, something that's repeated in the Equalities Impact Assessment, where it says that in order for this not to have a negative impact, the housing framework for 16 plus accommodation needs to have sufficient capacity. And so I was just wondering if there was assurance that the housing framework would have that capacity to try and take some of the burden that would be coming from the closure of that service.
yes, I can give reassurance that that is the case.
Okay, any other questions, contributions from anyone? Right, before I put those recommendations to Cabinet, the feedback from scrutiny was that the Corporate Scrutiny and Governance Board resolved to request that the Council Cabinet ensure that there is an adequate and consistent level of support and care provided to the young people affected by the changes to the HRS, and we can certainly agree to that. So Cabinet to approve the recommendations set out in the report and the recommendation for overview scrutiny. Thank you. Now, agenda item number 12 is a joint report from Councillor Bolton and Councillor Repton. Councillor Repton, please.
Thank you, Chair. Currently, the City has a substantive children-appropriate adult service commissioned by the Council at a cost of £40,000 per annum. This is a statutory service. There is no equivalent for adults with learning difficulties or mental ill health. There is the opportunity to create a consistent, uniform adults and children's service across Derby City and Derbyshire County by commissioning a universal joint service through the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner. This will cost the Council no more than what is currently paid for the children's service. Value for money shall be ensured through a competitive tendering exercise, and the decision of Cabinet is to agree to pursue the joint arrangement with the county and transfer funding to the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner to support the new arrangement. So the recommendation is as printed, Chair, and so I put that to Cabinet. Thank you.
Any questions or contributions from anyone? Okay, so the feedback from scrutiny is that the Corporate Scrutiny and Governance Board resolved to request that Council Cabinet monitor the service to ensure appropriate scrutiny is in place and that the Council received value for money. So I'm sure we can agree to that. So I'll put that to Cabinet, plus the recommendations. Can I have a show of hands, please? Okay, thank you. Okay, so agenda item number 13, and that's Councillor Repton again, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. All councils with adult social care responsibilities have a legal duty to set a fair rate for care for registered providers within their boundary. This entails taking account of the cost pressures on providers through consultation by seeking the views of the local providers. In order to demonstrate the Council has taken a robust and considered view to setting fee rates, the Council has an agreed cost model with the provider community. Cost pressures identified are by the sector are living wage, recruitment, training costs, lower rates of occupancy, for some providers the apprenticeship levy. Based on the information gathered and the current and future inflation rates, it's proposed that an uplift of 3.41% is applied to residential care fee rates and 3.3% for care for home care rate fees. You have the opportunity on page 1 to see the summary where that information is contained and the recommendations at 2.1, 2.2, 2.3 and 2.4, which I recommend to Cabinet. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, any questions, contributions from anyone? Okay, so before I put the recommendations to Cabinet, the Corporate Scrutiny and Governance Board resolved to note the report. So Cabinet to approve the recommendations as set out in the report. Can I have a show of hands, please? Thank you. Agenda item number 14, Councillor Sane, please.
This report and some of the other reports which we have considered in terms of acquisitions for the council to add to our affordable housing stock just demonstrates that the council is proactively liaising with developers and landowners to see what's holding up the development. And where we are able to offer assistance, we do that, and that's a approach that we ought to welcome on behalf of our officers who are really being very, very proactive to make sure we have more and more affordable housing in the city. So this welcome opportunity for us to acquire additional 14 apartments and 4 bungalows in the city, we should support the recommendations and take this opportunity and benefit from it.
Councillor Holmes, please.
That's to be welcomed, Chair. Could I just ask in a wider sense, do you perceive the council to be moving towards being sort of an investor in development, both in the city and elsewhere?
The council is actually already investing money where we feel it's appropriate. But obviously, the money used is so far from the HRA. As a profit-making body, we have been considering to change our setup and take advantage of it, but we're not quite there yet. And I think some work is being done for us to set up a company where we are able to do that.
Okay, any other questions, contributions from anyone? Okay, I think it's worth noting that, you know, clearly in these times it gives us a huge opportunity to be as innovative as we can, and so other options we're looking at doing is investing for market rate, you know, if we can, you know, either within the city boundary or outside the city boundary by setting up our own investment, you know, company to be able to do that. So again, very similar to what some other councils have done. So that's something we're also keen to explore. So Cabinet to approve the recommendation set out in the report. And can I also include the feedback from scrutiny is that the Corporate Scrutiny and Governance Board resolved to request to Council Cabinet that these new acquisitions to be ring-fenced for disabled occupants if the demand is there when the properties become available. So Cabinet to approve the recommendations. Show of hands, please. Thank you. Councillor Hussain again, please.
This report confirms that our housing revenue account is actually in rude health, and it will enable us to meet all the obligations on us in terms of repairs, investment, etc. for foreseeable future. There are some uncertainties, and the first one is that we're not sure when the rental reduction ends, what regime will replace it. There are some assumptions that we've made that we'll be allowed to raise rents by CPI plus 1% for the first 4 years and 0.5% after that, but it's not clear from government papers that that's what will happen. And the other uncertainty is on high-value sale of properties. We will be expected from 2018-19 to sell our high-value stock or pay a levy. In terms of what is the best way forward for us as a council, an options paper will be brought back to the Cabinet to see which way we ought to be going. So that creates a little bit of uncertainty. We're also actually on page 4. We are proposing to increase funding for estate pride. Last year, we actually decreased the funding because we, in view of the decrease in income because of the rent reductions, we might have been overcautious. So actually, we are making up for it by increasing the capital spend to up to 650,000 to make up for the decrease last year. And I think that will be a welcome opportunity for us to tackle some of the outstanding work which may have built up in the last year or so. So I think we need to promote this and make sure that this money is actually spent on tackling minor problems on our states, wherever they exist. So I recommend that we approve the recommendations set out in paragraph 2.1 to 2.6. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say, Estates Pride capital budget, yeah, that's good news. You mentioned about sort of check and balance, really, to find out how it progresses. Is there any mechanism in place or agreement to actually have that feedback to ensure that it's moving in the right direction, things are being spent where we would prefer them to be, and monitoring it?
We could actually bring a report back in 6 months' time and then give you an update on how it's going.
Okay, any other questions, contributions from anyone? Okay. The feedback from corporate scrutiny is that they resolve to note the report. So Cabinet to approve the recommendations set out in the report. Can I have a show of hands, please? Okay, thank you, that's approved. Okay, so agenda item 16, the Q3 revenue budget monitoring 2016-17. This is the Council's revenue monitoring report for Q3. It forecast a minor underspend of £280,000 by the year end against a net budget of £219 million. It also forecasts that 98% of the 19 million savings for 2016-17 will be delivered as planned. The Q3 position includes a number of variances against budget, with the most significant being adult care overspend from pressures in residential and community-based care, children's overspend for pressures in early intervention and home-to-school transport, and Treasury management underspend due to changes in debt policy which spreads the cost of repayment over a number of years. The recommendations set out in paragraph 2.1. Any questions or contributions from anyone? Okay, so the feedback from scrutiny was that to note the report. So Cabinet to approve the recommendations are set out in the report. Can I have a show of hands, please? Okay, that's approved. Thank you. Item 17, Q3 Capital Monitoring 2016-17 to 2018-19. This is the Capital Monitoring Report for Q3, which proposes changes to the 2016-17 programme, totalling £9.3 million. The major changes relate to potential slippage in property maintenance as at the end of the financial year approaches. The Our City, Our River scheme, as securing planning consent and landowner agreements have taken longer than anticipated, resulting in delays to the works. Regeneration scheme design changes and prolonged partner negotiations resulting in delayed works. Details of the changes are outlined throughout the report and in the appendices. Recommendations set out in paragraph 2.1 to 2.4. Again, Scrutiny and Governance Board resolved to note the report. Cabinet to approve the recommendations as set out in the report. Can I have a show of hands, please? Okay, that's approved. Thank you. Agenda item number 18, revision to the discretionary rate relief policy. This report amends the existing policy to reflect the removal of retail relief and transitional relief as they are no longer available, and include a £1,500 relief relating to the treatment of office space occupied by local newspapers. The cost of the relief will be refunded to the Council through government grants. Recommendations are set out in paragraphs 2.1 to 2.2. Again, there's no direct feedback other than to note the report by Scrutiny and Governance Board. So Cabinet to approve the recommendations set out in the report. Can I have a show of hands, please? Okay, thank you. Okay, on to the performance monitoring for 2016-17 Q3 results. The report is, and we have an officer to just go through a quick overview of the key points. Thank you.
Yeah, this report provides highlights from the Q3 performance monitoring of the Council's scorecard. Currently, we're at 66% performance projected for the year end. We've shown highlights of good performance, paragraphs 410 onwards, as well as areas for improvement at 414 onwards. It's fair to say that pretty much all of those areas have actually been discussed at scrutiny boards in recent months. The other thing to say is just the Appendix 3 contains further details in terms of commentary and actions that are being taken with respect to all of those underperforming areas. The recommendations are to note the Q3 performance results, give particular attention to obviously those that have been highlighted in the improvement report, and also note any comments from corporate scrutiny.
Okay, any questions, contributions from anyone on this? Okay, so before I put the recommendations to Cabinet, there are a number of feedback from the Scrutiny Board, and I'll read them out separately. The Board resolved to request that Council Cabinet, 1, closely monitor the high levels of sickness absences amongst staff at monthly or bi-monthly meetings of Council Cabinet under the performance item section. 2, note that the Corporate Scrutiny and Governance Board have requested a performance surgery on this issue to be undertaken once data is available from Q1 of the next financial year. And 3, further work is done to examine the quality and quantity of performance of the ECHPs through quality performance framework and develop an ECHP quality metric. So I think we can approve all those. So the recommendations set out in the report and the 3 requests from the board, put them to Cabinet. Can I have a show of hands for approval, please? Okay, that's approved. Thank you. Okay, agenda item number 20, contract and financial procedures matters. This report covers the following items: a waiver to continue with the existing CRM system whilst we explore alternatives, the use of reserves to deliver education and healthcare plans, award of contract for crowdfunding, approval of an application for a scoping study on clean air zones. The details are laid out in the report. Recommendations set out in paragraphs 2.1 to 2.4. And there's also an addendum which has been circulated, contract and financial procedures matters addendum, with recommendations 2.1 to 2.2. Okay, so Cabinet, Councillor Holmes, please.
Thank you, Chair. On the crowdfunding, can I just ask, you know, in general, it seems a positive, you know, modern way of achieving community investment. Could I just ask some clarity in terms of, probably from all councillors' point of view, really, the use of Section 106 and SIL. It mentions here targeting funds to community projects that meet your criteria. What does that actually mean? Does it mean the council's adopted criteria? Does that mean that we're going to have, you know, the same framework as neighbourhood working, where the deprivation index weights heavily on this particular mechanism of community funding? I think there needs to be greater clarity really on that aspect, and the use, certainly the use of Section 106, to make sure that as ward councillors we have a huge input into this in terms of where the community funding is matched or is presented in the first place. Excuse me. The other thing is, could you just clarify which pot of money within the council the £45,000 is coming from, and also spread over 3 years? What is that to actually pay for it? You know, is that the fee, if you like, or what is that actually paying for in terms of this particular model?
Thank you, Chair. In terms of where it's coming from the Delivering Differently reserve, which was set about to find initiatives of how we can do things differently across the council, and the £45,000 is to pay for the implementation and the licensing costs of the system that we'll be using.
Mr. Youthmayor, please.
I was just on the crowdfunding issue again. Very much welcome the start of a crowdfunding idea, but I'm just wondering why the council had decided to create its own platform, and just rather than use maybe already existing platforms such as maybe Kickstarter or Indiegogo. And I was also wondering if it could be clarified, because I know different crowdsourcing have different ways that if the full amount of money isn't reached, what happens to the money, and whether that's still taken by the council, or whether the money only goes if the set amount gets reached. I was just wondering if that could be clarified.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of things. Crowdfunder is a platform. It's not a platform we've created, so it is an existing platform that's out in the market, and that's what we're procuring. In terms of the whether a scheme will go ahead, the schemes will be proposed. The council may choose to help those schemes get to fruition, but the whole process is managed by the organisation that this is set up in a bit like crowdfunding that you've seen before, and they will determine what happens with it. They set the platform and they help us administer the actual scheme.
Councillor Holmes, please.
Thank you. Just to ask again, there is a little bit of concern, certainly from me, just to learn a little bit about what this meeting your criteria is in terms of targeting funds. Forgive me for being a little bit jumpy about it, but you know the history here with neighbourhood funding. We might have the argument about whether using the deprivation index is right or wrong or whatever. But I would say, you know, there needs to be clarity there as to how the criteria is going to be chosen from this council in terms of agreeing the community schemes to be moved forward under this scheme.
I think this there's two aspects to this, Councillor. The first is that there will be the opportunity for a number of schemes to come forward by the community, which may well be delivered by the community, and that will be absolutely fine. The council won't necessarily have an interjection into that. We just need to make sure that it's legal, that it's appropriate, etc. But if it's something that somebody in that community wants and the community want to support, then that's absolutely fine. The council then need to determine from their perspective what are the criteria that they may want to incentivise and get schemes to come forward. So it might be around skills, it might be around education, etc. And they're the things where the council have to determine what are those priorities for them to support as well.
Okay, any other questions, contributions from anyone? Okay, so the feedback from overview scrutiny was the Scrutiny and Governance Board resolved to note the report and request clarification and additional funding requested to deliver procurement for education healthcare plans. So Cabinet to approve the recommendations set out in the report. Show of hands, please. Okay, and the addendum, of course. Yeah. So thank you. It's approved. Okay, thank you very much. So, agenda item number 21, exclusion of press and public, please.